Hello, Hibiscuses! I am so delighted to bring you part 2 of my series where I will be using colonizer-free astrology to help you understand not only how to navigate the era of fascism that we currently exist in, but most importantly, how to explore, unpack, and dismantle those very murky, complicated, sometimes confusing feelings you have about your identity during these very testing times. So if you are new around here, hello, but I essentially created this series to help people understand how much colonialism impacts the way they recognize their own identity. And this whole series will help you understand how the current transits we're going through are intentionally antagonizing you, not to bury you, but to plant you so you can grow into the person that you were always destined to be. So, you know the routine. Grab a cup of chai, get comfortable. Let's have a very candid cosmic chit chat. Wait a minute, before I forget, if you would like to learn about how these transits impact you as an individual, then please feel free to go over to my TikTok and my Instagram page. It's Carefree Brown Girl as always. That's where I go through the horoscopes in a more like personable way, right? So you can work out how it affects your energy, what you're meant to do with that time. And then it's me talking about daily topics and how the transits reflect all the bakwas that's happening. Now, on the second note, if you genuinely would like to learn about Vedic astrology in a deeper way, right? You want to learn what the nakshatras are, you want to learn about terminology, mahadashas, all that kind of jazz, right? If it piques your interest, no problem, my love. I have a Patreon page that's dedicated to more like, I would say, detailed talks. So again, Carefree Brown Girl, go and check it out. And finally, between you and I have a really hectic schedule at the moment. So I'm currently going through like hundreds and hundreds of readings. But if you ever feel called to get a reading from me or you want to have a chit chat to learn more about yourself, no problem, right? Go to my website, cultivateco.uk, go to the personal readings tab and listen, whenever you need to have a cosmic chit chat that's more one-to-one, look at the options, have patience, book yourself in, and then I'll get back to you, okay? Other than that, we have a lot of business to unpack. Let's go. So let's begin by quickly recapping what we discussed in part 1, right? So we are currently undergoing one of the most spiciest transits of human history, and it begins really with Rahu and Ketu. So Ketu is a planet that symbolizes the dissolving of illusions, liberation, backbiting, wealth accumulation, and most importantly, it represents unprocessed karmas. Now it's currently going through the 9 types of Leo, and the Leo nakshatras symbolize power, authority, and very interestingly, the social responsibilities, the purposes, and our values in regards to the other people in our lives, all kinds of relationships, right? So traditionally, when Ketu goes through Leo, you have this very strong theme of many systems, norms, traditions, figures, cultures. That power falls. And then that opens up space for 2 big things to happen, right? Number 1 is genuinely a huge disconnect for everybody involved for no longer praising or feeling attached or even trusting what used to have such a hold over them, right? They don't value it, they don't like it. In many ways, you're exposed to a lot of the illusions around manufactured power. Then that puts you in a unique place because the second thing associated to that is this really like gnarly feeling of I don't want to be controlled by anyone, and I am no longer willing to minimize and suppress myself for these bullies, losers, very like, you know, self-inflated figures to feel like they're strong because they're not. But that opens up a really brilliant path where the underdogs and all the game changers, all these revolutionaries, whether they're artists, educators, leaders, they're initiated onto their path. but it also has a connotation that those who are falling out of favor and that power that they've got so used to and greedy on, they're going to be really, really spooky trying to hold on to that, right? So it creates a very volatile atmosphere. Then we look at Rahu, right? Rahu again deals with deception, provoking things so radical change can occur, technology. Interestingly enough, it deals with like the divine plan being unveiled, and there's another element which deals with this concept of like the sins of a past devil, and now it's going through the 9 types of Aquarius, and the Aquarius nakshatras represent knowledge, destruction, radical healing, really interesting like solidarity amongst groups that are intentionally manufactured to hate one another, right? So then with that, not only are you at a time of great discontent, but it's this really delicious energy where the counterpart has never felt more empowered, more brazen, more necessary to reclaim their own strength. But what makes it so beautiful, it's not individualism, it's this wonderful collective journey of solidarity. So in part 1, what I was summarizing is when you are in that hotbed of transits, energies, and purpose, the number one impact that's meant to have on people's identity is you learn how much colonialism poisons you as a person, right? There's a reason you feel a little bit more uncomfortable and discontent in your identity than you ever have done previously. It's not that you don't know who you are, because that's not the name of the game here. It's more of a very conscious feeling that for some reason I am being held back, I am being censored, I am being suppressed, so the true identity can't come forward. And you know what? I can no longer go along with this ruse. I have to deviate. Now, as we were going through part 1, as we close off that video, I remember I said to you guys, I'm like, oh my God, they try and make us think like consumerism is our identity. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So the thing I was thinking about, right? Colonialism birthed capitalism. It based sexism, patriarchy, colorism, homophobia, transphobia, basically all the isms and phobias you could ever imagine. But it created them so it makes it easier for them to financially exploit lands and people for their financial gain, because that's all colonialism is. Never ever let them make you think it's anything sophisticated, academic, or political. It's literally just a money game, and they need to create loads of divisions. They need to create loads of illusions, loads of propaganda, so it's easy to extract wealth. And your identities, believe it or not, really determine the level of ease someone can extract wealth from and get away with very exploitative practices. So that's what I'm saying. In the first phase, where we know astrologically we are in the downfall of colonialism, you getting really connected to your identity, feeling ever so proud, and most importantly, confident and safe enough to make decisions that align with your identity. Oh, baby, that is the most tool we could ever have, you know, in the first round of this fight. And when I was thinking about it, it's not that like consumerism completely replaces our personality, but I think colonialism and the oppression it needs to thrive and sustain heavily relies on consumerism, because it almost distracts us. It makes us think there's value in its system. And I think, again, politically, spiritually, physically, economically, consumerism is like a soft power and a deep influence. Colonialists, in all their different flavors and form, can use people to keep them disconnected from their identities. And then when I was thinking about stuff like that, I was like, oh, so from 2025 until 2027, Saturn, a planet which symbolizes imprisonment, wealth accumulation, human misery, is going through the 9 types of Pisces. And the Pisces nakshatras, let me grab my notes, represent assimilation, imprisonment, attachments that bring frustrations. Do you see the journey that we're on, Hibiscus is? So let's spend some time unpacking Saturn and Pisces and how it brings up, essentially, I would say, us becoming more conscious of how consumerism is messing up our ability to achieve liberation in the different flavors and, you know, visions that looks like for different types of people. And really us understanding why consumerism holds the power it does over identity and looking at some real life examples. So again, take a deep sip of that jar and let's get into it. It all begins with Saturn. So the three features that I think are going to be so dominant about Saturn's energy whilst it maneuvers Pisces are the following, right? So number one is this idea of wealth accumulation, because again, we are existing in a time where fascism has fully returned. You know, when I speak about fascism, I honestly feel like I'm talking about Voldemort in the series of Harry Potter films. They're like, oh no, the one who will not be mentioned, the return of the Dark Lord, because honestly, we are very much in that era. Okay, now the important thing to understand is when you look at colonialism, all it does is essentially hoard wealth. And in its ventures of hoarding wealth, that's when you get the following. So that's when you get the exploitation of workers. That's when you get an increase of a sick population, physical health, mental health, may I even say probably spiritual health, right? Thirdly, you have an increase of violence and hate, because what do hoarders of wealth need to do? They need you to not look at them at like the thieves they are, and they need you to think your neighbor or the person across the road or those people who are the victims of the destruction that the colonizers have done are your enemies, but not the person that has you working your bones to death, not the person who is responsible for you having low self-esteem, not the person who consistently tells you unless you fit into this society that is very much based off the exploitation of your labor, your culture, your knowledge, your joy, your happiness, you are not welcome, right? So for me, in the first instance, and you can see it politically, look at all our different countries and look at the conversations we are currently having, right? So across Europe, there is outrage on higher taxes, but a lower quality of life. But meanwhile, the rich have never been richer. Look at America, right? When you look across all of the United States, not only is there this unfathomable amount of debt, but it seems that they are more willing to take on more debt for the sake of military and conquering, and again, these elites. But everyday people cannot afford to have basic access to healthcare, which is a human right. And everywhere we look, even if you talk about, I did this really interesting Instagram post. So again, if you have time, go to my page, check it out. But I was talking about, we're existing in a time where previously people have created stuff in all these illusions and they've tried to big it up as like, it's going to be so great for humanity. And when these things have aged, they've only created more grievances. So again, the last time Saturn went through Pisces, Jeff Bezos created Amazon, but Amazon then went on to create a regression in workers' rights, destroy small industries, and again, really spearhead the destruction of a lot of land in different countries. Specifically, I would say the global south, and God forbid, but the more economically deprived areas across like the United States, and I think flickers of Europe too, right? But at the time, it's like, thank God you can get a book. And then it went from thank God you can get a book to like, oh my God, when you're out, we can come to your door. And it's having that discernment. Just because someone is offering you convenience does not mean it is really right for you. The other examples I used were the likes of like even Margaret Thatcher. Last time Saturn was in Pisces, she had this whole thing about, you know, building wealth for the middle class. Well, she destroyed the middle class because through her deregulation, through her privatization, we then ended up now with a housing crisis. People are poorer now than peasants in the medieval time, or even like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when many countries were still being occupied by different colonizers. The current citizens of those countries are poorer now than they were under occupation. So my thing here is your identities they are so clearly being shown to you, not only how they are weaponized against you to extract your money, but how much wealth is being withheld from you because we keep pandering to these weirdos. And that's truly what they are. They're weirdos. It's not normal to think I am entitled to money and it's okay for me to harm other people to have that money. That's not right. It is not normal to make workers that you exploit fantasize about the ability to rest and be able to live a decent life. That's a weirdo, that's a bully, that's an abuser, Hibiscus is, right? So again, I think as Saturn is making its way through the different Pisces nakshatras, there's very much that energy of, if you don't reclaim it, you are now sanctioning yourself to like irreversible consequences, which will have, you know, such deep suffering, which actually leads me to the second part of Saturn, right? Human misery. Let's talk about it, Hibiscuses, right? For me, Saturn isn't a planet of like evil and reaping. Saturn's actually really positive, right? But we just exist in a time where Saturn's gonna reinforce. I would say it's more sour Emily side, right? It's very much coming through. But you know, let's go bit by bit. So look at it like this. Many of us are working out now that how we positioned our identity has not led us to the safety, the wealth, the status, perhaps even the peace and stability we thought it would. In real time, we are seeing how being complicit with the oppressor and their take on culture, their take on economic prosperity, their take on international relations has caused us sincerely, like, not just like human misery in terms of like, I'm frustrated. I think psychological damage, physical damage, as always, spiritual damage. But the thing here, Saturn is trying to show you your misery, not to mock you or punish you. I think really to seduce you with liberation. Because how much longer can you sit in this misery, Hibiscuses? Think of it like this. So when you look at consumer reports, right? Whenever we're going to go into like a bad economy, you will always see like small little trinkets become really popular because it's this idea of like, but I can still afford this luxury. But we now exist in a time where your small little luxury is the ability to buy butter and bread. If not medieval oppression, why medieval oppression shaped? Like, this is the stuff of history, and that's why I keep emphasizing to people, you are living in historical times. Like, we are going to be documented and studied in really probably concerning and fascinating ways. And please think about all the rhetoric I use when I create like the big horoscopes and the big predictions of what will happen over like said years. If we're in the downfall of colonialism, don't you think they're going to study our bondage to our oppressors the same way when we look back at slavery in like the 1900s and the 1800s and we study our ancestors? You know, we are often told this picture, they were complicit, they were too scared. And then as we've gotten older, and thank God for the internet, when we have learned firsthand from other communities, when they retell stories of their people, we're like, there was so many rebellions. They barely hung on to it, right? And it wasn't the case they would just be and they gave in. No, they fought every year, every month, every week, every day. So even then, when they are in miserable circumstances, they did not obey. And that's the thing. When you find yourself in like, again, a pressure cooker of human misery, it's not just about, oh, these are your negative karmas being delivered. Your job when you go through negativity isn't just to exist and take it on the chin, but it's to actively create present circumstances and future circumstances that never allow that misery to touch you again. So again, when we look at everything, isn't it wild how they are trying to distract people with consumerism? Like, for me, the fact that people are like, oh, there's a new trend of like labubus, or like, you know, this is a hotspot destination and you should do this and A, B, and C. But we're still not talking about we need to call urgent elections to get rid of dictators and fascist leaders who have shown us in real time, even if we elected them in good faith, they are aligned with stuff that is not right and does not reflect how we feel about humanity and, in all honesty, the peace we seek with one another, right? But thank God I could purchase a Labubu. Thank God another celebrity dropped a fragrance, a show that I can give my money to. Pay attention. Like, could you imagine if... And the thing is, it did exist. Why am I saying, could you imagine? I just thought back then to France during World War II, right? Coco Chanel was big and happening and building most of her career during the occupation of France. Don't you think when people study certain parts of history, they are bewildered that there are literal genocidal camps going on, there are countries being occupied, there's such public venom and scary, spooky behavior happening, but meanwhile, you're hosting fashion shows, you're tip-tapping in like your Chanel pantsuit, hibiscuses, like, again, pay attention, connect the dots. Because even if we connect the dots between wealth accumulation and human misery, look at it like this. You're telling me you think it's normal that you should work for like 50 to 60 years of your life in miserable conditions, having to justify and fight for you to rest, always playing mental mind games, code switching, masking, and at the end of it, and there's nothing wrong with age is very sexy, age is not a reflection of anything, but let's just say when you are perhaps in one of your more eras in life where you need a little bit more attention and care, you should be grateful right at the end when you can't really enjoy it the way you would have perhaps in your youth or earlier. You have a shitty little room that you can call your own on land that you don't own. Or look at it like this. You are happy that you can buy a lip gloss, but you still cannot afford to have a space of your own. You can buy a little tea or coffee, but you cannot afford to have access to like medical care or just even basic, like, you know, I think nails, eyelashes, all that should count as it too, but like you can't have access to treatments that you know make you feel good. You're starting to see the connection. And then if you think about it a lot, even now, I was thinking about it on TikTok, there's trends of like people showing that like, oh, you know, if someone has money, if they're buying like those packs of eggs, that big tub of butter, and it's like all that has been, even now, think about when people are like, I eat this kind of food, I go to this restaurant, this is where I get this from, you know. It's almost like they're trying to sever you from your identities and show you your purchase history is who you are. And if we know colonialism is a financial venture, don't you think it's really sickening? Because in real time, they're showing you that not only are you the commodity, but you are the worker. And if I can make your whole identity tied to me making money, I'm never going to lose influence over you. You're never really going to be successful at rebelling. I talk a lot about that. I actually want to explore and learn deeper about what is it that makes oppressed people turn into the oppressor. Like, I deeply want to study that because I think that would help me answer a lot of questions, you know? So pay attention because it's happening for a reason. And the last thing I had for Saturn was this concept of like not permitted to grow. Well, so when you look at Saturn, again, people who follow me on Patreon, you often hear me saying, Saturn delays, but it does not deny. Can I get an amen, right? When I'm in ceremony mode. But think about what we're discussing, right? However, our consumerism has been shaped and influenced by essentially oppressive values, philosophies, and structures. It has stopped us growing as people, right? And I truly believe that. I don't even mean just in terms of like it puts you in a certain financial bracket, because it does. Like, I don't agree with this whole thing of telling people who are financially struggling to work harder, because that's not the reality of why they're financially struggling. It is not fair to say billionaires and multimillionaires do not pay fair taxes, are entitled to so many loopholes, and consistently really are supported in their exploitation and abuse, of all these different assets and commodities in our societies, but the person who does not control how much their rent is, whose wages are not in line with inflation. So say for instance, right, Hibiscus is, let's say you travel, you get the bus to work, right? Originally it was $2. Well, inflation, it goes to $4.50, but your wage consistently stays at like $50 a week, whatever. You're becoming poor over time, but everything around you is becoming expensive. That's inflation, right? You cannot say with any sort of intellect and justification, people who are already exploited need to work harder when you are intentionally increasing everything around them so you can gain more money. This is what Saturn's trying to teach you, Hibiscus, right? And it probably sounds extreme. I appreciate if you're hearing this for the first time, but it is that extreme. That's why you're all feeling uncomfortable. And also think of it like this. When you are intentionally financially crippled so someone else can make whatever money they think they are due, don't you think that impacts how you feel about yourself, right? I can tell you now, I think a lot through my financial journey because I've had such a whirlwind in terms of career, right? As you guys say, law. And I think about the days where I really struggled. And I worked so many different jobs when I was younger, and then I went heavily into finance and tech, right? But there is a sharp difference in my confidence as a human. So when I'm working like these really shitty sales jobs, right? Or someone's like EA and I'm not being fairly paid, and like, oh God, it literally feels like the ninth circle of hell, right? I remember it's so bad to say, but I'm like, I do not feel really like attractive the way that I know I'm attractive because I can't afford the shit that I know would make me feel like a baddie, right? I don't really feel like I can socialize because I don't have money to socialize, so I feel more isolated. And there were even like abusive situations where I felt stuck in because I didn't have the money to leave, right? So I look at all of that, and then even then, isn't it weird? I would think that so there's a brand called Topshop that I loved when I was younger, right? I've always been like a fashion girly and all of that. Even then I looked at it and I was like, oh, I'm not reading myself because I'm not wearing the clothes that I know represent me. But don't you think it's weird that I think I need to buy certain stuff to be and show up as who I am? I think we're all in that energy again, but in a much more like serious kind of make or break way in some regards, right? And I just think when you look at the links that colonialism undeniably needs consumerism to do its dirty work and remained unchallenged. In fact, I wrote notes. Let me share them with you before we look at the Pisces nakshatras, right? So, firstly, 2 sex Hibiscuses. She's scrolling. Or maybe I didn't. Did I? Let me pause the video and come back to you. I inadvertently think I've just discovered a new circle of hell, and it literally looks like having to go through the notes section of someone who has ADHD to decipher and extract the talking points. Because what was that? I didn't even know I typed that much. The hell? But we can digress because I found the knowledge I was seeking to share. Let's go. Okay, so I think you can easily see how conflating consumerism with a person's identity serves colonialism in 4 clear categories. So the first one I had was economically. So colonialism tries to do this thing of capturing markets, right? So it can extract wealth. And in the modern day, what that looks like is putting people in a position where for some reason they always feel an incessant need to spend, and they cannot save, and they're kind of put in a situation where money is not staying in their hand. So that allows the colonizer to not only keep accumulating money, but they're never going to be in a position where their victims can challenge them financially or have the resources to fight back. You see how deep this shit runs? Now, number 2 was culturally, right? So you've got to remember, the act of consumerism is we're constantly buying because we think it's always this thing of like, I need this to be happy. I need this to be healthy. I need, right? And in some ways, when we're in this mindset of I need, I don't think we're conscious of it, but we're internalizing some level of superiority, because what's wrong already with our cultures, our means and our resources that we cannot be sustained or fulfilled by them? And also, so I would liken that to this, right? I think about this a lot actually. I often think about how many brown kids will venture out to go and get something like a golden latte, right? Which essentially is just milk, powdered turmeric, cinnamon, and a little bit of sugar or honey. Those are brown household staples. And even then, I think a lot how people are told that, like, oh, this is a new innovation of fitness, well-being, fashion. That's actually in your mom's cupboard. Your grandma had that exercise routine when she was living in occupied land and had to flee. And respectfully, like, those clothes you could probably find in your auntie's wardrobe. But it's that idea of like cultural erasure, if that makes sense. The third one was politically. I mispronounced that. I'm sorry, I have a speech impediment, but you know what I was trying to say, right? I think there's something in consumerism which like manipulates and needs people to become a type of person that's easier to exploit. And therefore, if you're easier to exploit, you're too distracted, you're too tired, you're too docile to politically fight back against the things that are oppressing you, or even be in a mindset to identify them. Because whilst I'm talking today with my chest about how consumerism is not a personality and we're forced to think consumerism should be our identity, this has took 30 odd years to basically learn. Right? And that's like very intentionally, and like many things had to happen. I was not conscious of it, right? So when you get into consumer mindset, it's this whole thing of it promotes individualism. So one of my favorite films of all time, unfortunately, is Fight Club. And I promise you, I'm not one of those like unsufferable film bros, even though sometimes I wonder if my film taste does reflect that. But anyway, so think of it like this. So it's three things, right? You associate what you buy with some level of status. Because think of it this way, red lipstick is red lipstick. What difference does it make if it's a designer brand, if it's a super drug brand, if you make that shit at home with Vaseline and some sort of paprika? If it stains your lips red, it stains your lips red. But we know, like, think about how we say, oh, that's a YSL girl. That is a Huda Beauty girl. Or, you know, that's an elf girl. That's Rogue. That's like, what's Selena Gomez's one? That's rare. Like, isn't it wild? So even if you don't think it does, well, why do you feel compelled to go for a certain brand? And don't say it's quality, because it's not. I know you exist in the same internet access as me, and you saw how Asia started blowing up the West's PR by saying they make you pay $600 for a bag. We sell it for $20 back home. That's why we look better than you bitches and we're well dressed. But you keep saying, oh, you're paying for a label, dumbass. I know you've seen the receipts. Save the nonsense for your employer when you need a 6 day, which you feel guilty about taking. Colonialism, friend. The second thing I was thinking about, because everyone's always wrapped up with buying and having and being seen with these items, I think it makes us weirdly okay with people being exploited, as long as we can get like our deliveries to our home, as long as I can get that cheap little trinket, as long as I can get A, B, and C. I think there's like some math there. But like, for me, it's very much training in that way. And then I think the third way, sometimes I wonder if they intentionally kind of make us sick with consumerism because we also become complicit in the oppression of others. So this is something we're going to talk about in part 3, because I'm taking you on a journey with this bad boy, right? But I was thinking about it, right? But I was like, you know, stuff like tea, coffee, even our clothing, all these things that we just think like every day we should be able to have access to. Well, guys, like realistically, they are made in like child slave labor factories. They are made like, I obviously, you know, I come from a farming family and I'm very passionate about agriculture and I'm learning about it, right? I cannot tell you how much my asshole dropped into my panties when I learned the amount of sexual harassment and abuse that women and children go through on tea leaves, and they still call them plantations. gagged, surprised, shooketh, right? And that's really what actually instigated my journey into getting into agriculture and all of that back home. Because I was like, fuck this shit, not on my watch, motherfuckers. And then I was like, I will never touch a fucking tea bag from any of these CUNTs again. I'll figure it out, right? That had such a profound impact on me. And the thing is so wild to me, I drink like 8 to 9 cups of tea every day of all genres, multicultural, baby, see. And it makes me feel so bad because there's like, and the way like I think I'm so entitled to have that tea set, like all of that, but then like I'm buying, say like I buy that tea packet for, I don't know, like £5 to £10, whatever, right? Even the audacity of me, there's times I've gone to France to buy fucking tea, I feel like such a shit bag, right? I'm not okay to then learn that the babe who literally is waking up at 4 a.m. going into a dark field with God knows what kind of weirdos and bullies, with her child strapped to her back, sweating, she's nimble, she's working in unbearable conditions, in unbearable heat, because you need a certain kind of temperature to get certain kind of tea leaves, and she barely makes £1 for the week. No, man, like, not like, I in good conscience and like, if I'm about what I preach, can't be with that shit. And like, and then someone's like, but it's all, you know, I would, but it's inconvenient. No, it's not inconvenient. You don't think it's inconvenient when she's scared that she's going to get violated to make pins. You don't think it's inconvenient when she's climbing hills with a baby strapped up. But it's not an inconvenience to me. That's bullshit. I could never say with my chest is an inconvenience to me. So then I have to do right by either sourcing companies that create goodness, or I got to figure some shit out and I'm importing teas and I'm making it happen in this bitch, right? But it's that, because for as long as I consume, yeah, I'm complicit in the harm of other people. That's why if you think about the boycott movement, and that's really what inspired part 2 was, I was bewildered as people were learning in real time how horrible McDonald's, Starbucks, Burger King, I got a list of them. I got a list for the days, right? And I get like, so even, let's go deeper and we're going to look at this later, but like, it's when people learn Nestle owns like multiple brands, and Nestle legitimately is fucking terrible. Like, I'm talking like the child kidnapper from Chi Chi Bang Bang, right? And they were like, they own everything. I got, what the fuck? And I was like, but that's it, honey. That's the colonialism, that you have one entity who abuses all these lands, comes up with the illusion of choice, and we somehow have ended up a bond. We don't even need it, but we are in a bondage mindset of consuming their things, and they only keep creating stuff for us to consume. And that allows them to say there's a need to exploit and hurt these people because there's a customer base that will take the products. You see why boycotting is so important? And that leads me to my final point, psychologically. So I think, and again, I think through the last 3 points I've made, you can see the impact that would have on someone's psyche. Because even to get to a point where you can't break away from that bondage, they've got you psychologically, right? But I think when you look at it deeper, a lot of it is around self-worth, probably. I think a lot of it is like self-worth, positioning in society. Even now, you know, it probably sounds wild, but like, you know, think about how we're all chatting about the downfall of BBLs, right? And nobody wants them now because they now have this image that people who get BBLs would be like, quote unquote, ghetto, working class. You have a said image. So everyone's gone back to thinness. But thinness is also linked to white supremacy. And this is a return of fascism. It's all interconnected. It's all, like, I promise you, like, I remember being younger and being like, oh, this is very conspiracy theory. Sometimes the girly pops just want to enjoy stuff, right? And I get why people think like that. I really do. I used to be one of them. So like, I can't, like, you know, what's that phrase? Kettle black, some shit like that? Kettle. Sorry guys, but you can't throw stones in glass houses. That's probably a better comparison. But it actually is that deep, because do you ever ask yourself, what is driving me to feel like I need those things? And being really honest, I think about it all the time, right? Because like, I wear makeup like a lot for filming, right? I'm doing like bridal makeup every other fucking day, right? And I remember I got to this point where like I was just buying like designer makeup, and I was like, but why? Like, what is that? Like, why do I feel I need these brands? Is it not so? Because I'm like, back in the day, like when I was younger, in my college days, I would have had all what? Like every Superdrug, right? Superstore brands. And my face will be, and I'm like, well, when did you get to a mindset that you needed this? And even then, I think we lied to ourselves, because I think the lie that I told myself was like, oh, it has great staying power. A formula is a formula. That's one of my beauty tricks. If you like a certain thing, see the country that it's manufactured and formulated in, and then just get the cheaper brands from that. So for instance, I went through this phase where I love like French makeup, right? Then I learned that like there was a bunch of beauty products that were produced in the same factory as the designer French ones, and I never looked back, right? It's a lot of stuff like that. Like it puts you into a certain mindset that, yeah, it is deep, isn't it? And the weird thing is, we will convince ourselves us buying these things is more a reflection of who we are, and it's just like us coming to life. And I'm like, no, that can't be though. That can't be the only way for me to establish my identity. Surely my identity should be seen in my day-to-day actions. Surely my identity should be seen in the passions I pursue. Well, I'm good about it. That should be it. Not really maybe the talent of that work. Maybe like my identity should be seen in the quality and the nature of the relationships I have with people around me, and the experiences I build. I don't really think consumerism being one of the big factors in who I am and how I perceived should really be there, you know? And with that, let's talk about how Saturn going through the Pisces nakshatras double downs on those themes. And I really hope it is sinking in to your head, Hibiscuses, how much we are like honestly manipulated into thinking consumerisms are our identity, and how it's weaponized against us to stay complicit in oppression. You know what, Hibiscus? When we look at the dominant themes that Pisces will bring out in these 2.5 years as Saturn moves through it, there are 3 themes that I find really striking and unnerving. So the first one is assimilation, right? And again, even in the conversations we've had thus far in this video, it's very clear to see how consumerism has been weaponized against us so we assimilate, right? Because they are essentially, it's objects of status, it's complicity in other people being exploited so we can have joy and pleasure. It's a lot of manipulation, and you've got to think about it so deeply, right? In the era of fascism, oppression, when we are learning in real time how insidious, nasty, cruel, violent, really a lot of our values, societies, and goals are, you're seeing this whole thing of trends tell us who somebody is. Like, think about the things that become really popular in the era of fascism. Clean girl makeup, skincare, this idea of like, focus more on buying stuff for your houses and goods and being good homemakers. Buy from our country, it's national, we don't need foreigners. It's assimilation, it's trying to indoctrinate you into fascism and spooky stuff. You see the power of knowing your own identity? The second one is imprisonment, right? So again, you know, throughout this video, we have touched on how when we are put into like kind of hyper consumerism, it does leave us in a vulnerable position financially. But then I was thinking about it deeper. The nature of our consumerism is to imprison others. If you really deep how our everyday foods, how, you know, I like sometimes it like bewilders me. It's stuff that we just think we should have and is so normal. Everything from like our phones, our laptop, Wi-Fi, like it's actually so scary when you consider how many things are forged in violence, right? But even us having the ability to consume inherently imprisons other people. We cannot think, if we seek to have fair societies and the same rest and the same freedom we are so diabolically hungry for and starved of, how do we think we could ever achieve it when in our everyday actions we are showing we are okay with other people being enslaved, abused, bullied, and intentionally exploited in much more vibrant ways than we are? And then even if I think about it deeper, you know, if you look at the big predictions I make, right? I talked a lot that like when Saturn goes through the Pisces nakshatras, the karmic prisons opens. So who will be liberated and who will be imprisoned? it's really sinister when you look at it from certain angles, because surely, again, I always say to people, you're not punished on what you don't know. If you didn't know something before a certain time frame, I've always assumed through the religious lens of Vedic astrology that God does not think your heart, your mind, or your soul is ready, right? I think he always favors us to find out. It doesn't matter if the information is painful, but he always favors us to find out when he thinks we are more inclined to make decisions where we show his grace, we can usher in change and all of that. I don't think it comes to us when we're more liable to act stupid. Think about how I always joke about, but I'm also being serious. I'm really grateful I met you in my 30s. It would have been really fun in my 20s had I met you earlier, but I don't really think I would have been of much service. I don't think I would have known how to sustain, and I definitely think I would have been out my depth. But in my big 30s, where again, like, I have some life exposure, there's more to come, right? But like, it's a good start. It's not as shaky. So think about that. How could we ask for our liberation when we quite literally are imprisoning others every time we take a sip of our tea or our coffee? And for some reason, we don't feel incentivized enough to be outraged and angry and so disgusted to even challenge those companies to get out of how they exploit those people. But that's a topic we're going to be covering. And the third one was the attachments that bring frustration, right? So that's kind of a dynamic that comes in Pisces and Nakshatras, which we're going to start breaking down shortly. So look at it like this, right? Quality of life. So again, superficial, but I think it rings true. As a fine babe, a fine UK babe, I am very conditioned to getting my nails did. I like my nails done. I like my pinkies. It makes me feel pretty, really makes me feel strong and comfortable. And I get used to a certain lifestyle, right? It's so wild when I think about the times where I've not had that money. And like, for me, these are the first things I give up, because I can't be being like, I'll pay like this much money to have my nails did, but my fridge is empty. Like, we should thank God I have enough common sense, but that's gonna have to go. It's weird I was about to say that would have to be a sacrifice. Why would it have to be a sacrifice? Why do we use a sacrifice, right? But it's a whole thing that we get used to a certain thing, and then when we can't have it, there is such a level of like sadness, pain, and frustration that, like, sometimes it motivates people to like, I need to go make more money, right? And I can have those things again. Sometimes it will motivate people to do spooky stuff so they can have access to those things. But either way, all of that's wrong. All of that's wrong. As I said that, I was like, but it's not right. When you lose money, I really do think for 80% of people, we are manufactured into poverty. Like, I think about why God had me working in the technology sector, why I went through the finance industry, and even to this day, why I feel like so passionate about learning about like economics and stuff. I really think it's a drill into me that like this whole thing is rigged. And even when I studied colonialism, can I tell you something? Every financial institution that we use, every financial norm we have, whether it's tax or interest, and honestly, hang tight the Muslim for saying interest is haram, because it is fucking haram. It is fucking haram, right? It's literally a tool of slavery, guys. They literally created it so they could like exploit more wealth, harm more people. Like, it's all bullshit. It's not smart. It's not. This is the wildest thing as I make this video, right? And I think about the financial aspects. I think about economies. None of this is intelligent or smart. This is literally, we have at some point normalized the mediocrity of our oppressors and their stupidity. You know what this is? It's theft. This is all theft. Because what do you mean the strength of economy is seen by how much people are consuming? So when like you watch the news and they're saying GDP and this has gone up and this has gone down, all they're talking about is spending power. So a country's currency weakens when its people can't spend. But even then, shouldn't you pride yourself more on how much your people are saving? Think about even how the conversation is structured. It's structured in exploitation. Oh my God, this feels like a religious experience and a half. But like, it's not right how Hibiscus is. It's really not. So when you look at Pisces, right? Because the whole Pisces vibes, when you summarize it, is either like you go towards enlightenment or you drown in illusion, but you're at the crux of death. Pisces is inherently death. So you get the extreme of everything. It's the totality of life, right? I'm just saying, I think we're being deeply challenged to see certain stuff because if we're in the downfall of colonialism astrologically, I imagine there is a wave of realizations and a wave of new educators, a wave of new philosophers, all these cultural leaders, all these kind of creators that show us we have been sitting in darkness. And in some ways, we are in like a situation where we've been told we can't leave, but the door's always been open. But we've chosen to sat in that room because we've been scared that we don't know what's outside the door. And you like an abusive relationship, you'll never have better than me if you leave me. And now God's like, it's not worth it. Before we start breaking down the Pisces nextrators properly bit by bit, I just want you to think about how happy do you feel after you've been shopping? How sad do you feel when you can't buy something? How useless and purposeless have you felt when it comes to what you've acquired and what you don't have? None of it is normal. None of it is normal. And the fact that we live in a culture where people are doing shopping hauls, when people are like showing extreme consumerism, and we romanticize it, we fantasize over it, we want to be it, it's fucked because it's all rooted in oppression. Because tell me why you will not celebrate, these are my coming points, but I don't think it's smart. I don't think it's fucking spiritual. I don't think it's admirable. I just think it's crusty and it's giving. Like you rather stay with like the bitch ass who makes you feel shit than go towards like proper love where you are cared for, you feel beautiful and all of that. Oh my God, the colonialism is the biggest ick known to man. I need to quote that or create like a t-shirt because what the fuck? Oh. Hibiscuses, I genuinely think halfway through making this video, colonialism really needs us so desperately to conflate consumerism with our own identities because it's such an effective tool for them. If you really think about it, it allows them to maintain control over us. It makes it diabolically easy to extract wealth from even more sources than just the people they enslave and harm. And ultimately, it does something to us, but we don't really resist. We delay our own liberation. We romanticize our oppression. How dastardly, huh? Hibiscuses, I am pretty sure there will be 5 things that happen while Saturn goes through Pisces that clearly show us how much we have been poisoned by consumerism and how it's affecting our identities, that it will allow us to break away from these bondages because we will be so disgusted by these 5 things that we will create radical changes in our societies and we will start bringing down big bad businesses and big tech. Yeah, I think that's how it's going to go. So here's the first one, right? Number 1, I think we will learn in real time how our abusers making us conflate consumerism with our identities is also behind replacing indigenous economies and values. So look at it like this, right? Colonialism allows for the destruction of self-sufficiency. Colonialism has always dismantled local and sustainable production systems. So I want you to think of agriculture, crafts, trade networks, artisans, musicians, educators, right? These are brilliant systems that existed long before they came that focused on community needs. Because may I remind you, right? Think about how in the rise of fascism, we have lost third spaces, right? So those like community centers, those local programs that allow people to come and bond, right? Think about how Amazon has destroyed and decimated these brilliant family-owned businesses that existed on our high streets for decades, and really they know you, they know your family. Like, it destroys so much identity. It's like so sickening as I'm speaking to you about it, right? Even when I was like thinking about this first point, the first thing that I thought of is how nasty Amazon has been in India. The fact that they are aggressively pursuing the Indian market, so thank God someone can have some incense and the Valiala candles come to the house. But but then you're in real time putting out business of the bummen who've created those incense sticks and those candles for like hundreds of years, and there's such craftsmanship and beauty and love and cultural knowledge that goes into it. It's decimated for what? Convenience. And then it's weirder because we're made to think it's a flex that we can show, especially in India. They think it's a flex to show that like I can have something delivered to my house, but you don't think it's a flex that you get handmade crafted products from a real artisan whose family for generations has done it. Arc off, this shit is so nasty. So consumerism replaces all of this with a dependence on imported goods that are controlled by colonial powers and its corporations, no? Look a little bit deeper, right? What that then is linked to is a devaluation of local culture. Look at it deeper, because then that links to a devaluation of local culture, right? Think about how we now exist in a time where products or services that are tied to marginalized people and a particular group and like indigenous identity and skills. So again, this might be like superficial, but think weaving, pottery, traditional foods, astrology, music, sports, I don't know, clothing, all of it. When we allow consumerism to take over our identities, we start seeing things that come from our people that are so precious, so beautiful, as backward, primitive, and not impressive. But thank God you could get something that's half the quality, none of the energy, nor the goodness behind it. And it's this idea of like, thank God we're modern, thank God like we have these superior colonial goods. And that has a ripple effect in terms of us associating status and progression with the abandonment of traditional ways in our people. Oh, that's nasty work, Hibiscus. Even if you look deeper, right? My second point was colonialism, again, when we conflate it with consumerism being our new identities, colonialism thrives on creating new markets, and again, that dependence piece. So colonialism and oppression is really defined by economic extraction, right? So when you think of these different oppressors, they created their colonies to source raw materials and kind of captive markets, because before they came, these communities, these countries, these people had not only mastery over a resource, a land, a food, whatever it was, a material, but they benefit from selling it. It was theirs, and it should be theirs because they created it, they harnessed it, it was where they lived. These sickos then convinced colonized populations that their worth and their identity was tied to consuming specific products that could only ever come from them. And then again, because they then hijack the same things that their victims harnessed and knew what to do with, all that money flows back to them. Oh, nasty, nasty work. And then that links to them creating needs, right? Think about how, oh God. So think about tea leaves, right? Tea leaves originally come from China. The British Empire literally poisoned and drugged the Chinese people. I don't know if you know this, but as I've been learning about farming, I didn't know how nasty botanical, like florist, all that kind of stuff is deeply marred by colonialism. If you ever want to learn, in fact, I will be teaching you about it in like the 2030s and perhaps even very shortly, because when Gabriel goes through Cancer and Taurus, we having all kinds of wild conversations about nature and the environment, right? But oh my God, what was my point? But it's like, so the British Empire went to China, poisoned them, drugged them so they could steal their tea leaves and then take it back into what we recognize as Sri Lanka and India, so they could monopolize from making money from tea leaves. And then think about how you think tea is inherently a British thing. Like, oh, we love a good cuppa, it's what the British do, afternoon tea. You stole it from the victims of your violence, and then you priced it, and then you made it your good. Oh my God, this is Israel. Israel was created by the UK. Oh God, it's nasty, nasty work. I feel sick, right? So then what's weirder, not only have you stolen, you then create a cycle of dependency where we only want that product through kind of like colonial advertising or the hands of the oppressors. And again, our identity has somehow become linked from consuming things from their hands. I'ma throw up. That's not even nasty. What's worse than nasty? Diseased? Like, that's horrific. That's demonic. In fact, let's talk about the first Pisces nakshatra, Purvabhadra, right? Purvabhadra is Pisces type 1, right? And it looks after raw materials. And it also deals with this idea. It's Shakti. It kind of has like two different vibes, right? So one is about like this fiery transformation of the person and their ideologies, but it also talks about like a spiritual fire that uplifts the one who sacrifices. Oh, let's unpack that, Hibiscus. My mind is blown right now because when we look at Purvabhadra heavily symbolizes like oil, energy, gas, like the natural resources, woods, water. It's everything we get from the environment, right? And so when I start to think about Saturn imprisoning people, I see three things. I think in real time, we're being seen how we are being tricked and hoodwinked by the oppressors into thinking we should purchase these things off them like they don't come from free and Mother Nature. Secondly, I think we're also seeing how the very basic things that drive our day-to-day, that give us electricity, that allow us to use our goods, are rooted in such violence. You know, when I was talking to you about like this idea that the colonizers come in and they extract wealth and then they take it for themselves and make you feel like they manufactured it, and they hide the actual people and steal from the people whose money that should be, who have mastery over that knowledge, right? And maybe this is linked to the Shakti or Purvabhadra, which is about a fiery transformation. I thought three examples immediately where we have seen colonizers go in, steal from indigenous communities, then try to make money from their materials, but then in the process of making money from their materials, because they have no knowledge or any understanding how to look after these things, they destroy them. The first one I thought was, so again, I don't know if this is like really well known, but forestry is actually a really important thing for us to take care of. So I come from farmers. One of the things that we farm is trees, right? And alongside trees, it allows us to grow different materials that give you textiles, right? So like your fabrics and your clothes. So before colonizers came into many different countries, a lot of these indigenous communities had amazing mastery over stuff like growing cotton. We grow cotton in my farm in India, right? So we knew how to like grow cotton. We knew how to use like natural dyes and fibers to create like really breathable linens and materials that are good for you. We knew how to grow certain trees so it gives certain fruits, but also like how to harness those trees so you can like have energy and like do recycling and looking after nature. This is like, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but this is all like lost knowledge. And what I've been doing like outside of like this whole thing that I have with you guys is learning that knowledge again. Because at the moment, farming's in such a place that like you can only participate in farming if you basically get your essentially like all your products, all your fertilizers from the colonizers. And like, again, as someone who comes from Punjabi freedom fighters and is very fortunate enough to do stuff differently, I'm not playing ball. So I've been trying to learn and like basically find that information again so I can do it cost effectively, but also like I can do it in a way that is fair to the environment. And also the issue is a lot of people who want to do farming that comes from the lands that are currently occupied or have been destroyed by colonizers, which goes for the same for Punjab, they do it in such a way where they exploit the workers and take away the workforce. I wanted to basically like restore dignity to people and give them a fair wage. So a lot of that can be, it sounds really stupid, but basically a lot of that can be addressed and resolved when people actually understand the land and environment again, and you're no longer dependent on the colonizers' tools, right? And essentially colonial disruption, right? So when the colonizers basically did and continue to do their land seizures for plantations, and essentially like dividing us from our ancestral lands and taking us away, all that traditional knowledge is suppressed. You know, even if you think about it deeper, you have these kind of craftspeople and different artisans who were forced into labor so the colonizers could export their crops. The same happens today. Like, how would I tell you, like, you know, all the food that comes in your cans and you're like, it's so easy to get. How would you feel if I told you that's coming from a child that's no longer allowed to go to school because it has to make money, but it can't make money because the land was stolen from its families, so therefore they have to go and work for the colonizer and they never get educated? Or how about if I told you there's a woman who's so talented at like creating like couture can never type clothes, but then her fingers are broken picking up cotton or bits and pieces so you can have a cheap £5 t-shirt, and her talent never comes to life? Or how would you feel if I told you there is such rich understanding of beautiful creating tables and chairs and furniture that's lost because those families go bankrupt because they have to fight against colonizers who are monopolizing a market? So when you talk about boycott being like this fiery transformation, the reason you're uncomfortable with your identities is because you're being shown how, number one, it's not your identity, how much your identity is fueled by consumerism, and consumerism at the moment is deeply fueled by very evil shit. The sacrificer. Because think of it this way, if you can detach from all this weird shit they keep trying to get you to consume and act like it's normal, you inadvertently spark the revolution because they don't have money. And the thing is, they only cling on because they think these sources make them money. So what do you do when the value decreases and you make it really difficult for them to make money the way that they used to? You can only consolidate power for as long as someone's putting money in your hand. That power is easily shaken the second you stop. Do you understand why they make you think your identity is tied to consumerism? Because you give them longevity in their pursuits. I'll give you example number 2, right? This is very, very personal. So the colonizers then went on to essentially mechanize agriculture. And this created loads of issues because, again, even the tools that they create to make it easier and more convenient to farm are not good for the land, and they create way more damage, and they're not sustainable because nature needs time to heal. So while she gives us, we also have to give her time to rehabilitate. So I had like these 3 examples. So number 1, right? Think about global demand. Can I tell you something really wild that blew my mind? And I feel really embarrassed because I only learned it this year. So India's currently ruled by a fascist regime called BJP, right? They have basically made it a crime if you consume beef, because for their version of Hindu, cows are sacred, so you shouldn't eat beef, right? This is not the same for all Hindus. And also, how would you feel if I told you a lot of people who practice Hinduism are practicing a religion that was created by the Brits when they occupied the land? Oh, I come with receipts, knowledge, and all that shit, right? But my point was, even in a country like India, where they have demonized eating beef, and they are literally people for eating beef. The weirdest shit is fascism. What do you expect, right? India is one of the top exporters in the world for beef because simultaneously Punjab is the biggest dairy farmers in the world. So driven by global demand, there is all these things where like people need beef, even stuff like soybeans, right? That requires massive deforestation and destroying habitats and stuff that's naturally healing for you to be able to consume that level of meat. Or even like, do you know, to create like beef at the level that people consume it actually takes up so much fucking water like you wouldn't believe. Dairy farming doesn't even take up that much water, but slaughtering the animals and having them takes up a lot of resources. Before, a lot of diets across the world, people always ate meat, but like it was done in such a way that it wasn't like always on the table, and people got really good at actually eating like vegetables and other stuff. And I don't know if it was intentional, but like, yeah, like, and the thing is, they make us nasty little consumers, so we drive that industry. Because if there is not a consumer need, that thing doesn't exist. Even if you look at like economic coercion, right? People who have owned those farms where they're producing those things and they've been okay at sustaining it, they were pushed into kind of like low income farming, because you would have these big conglomerates that would do industrial farming, and because they lack the infrastructure that meets up with that consumer need and want, they abandon their traditional crafts as a way of survival. So you have to inherently adopt the oppressor's tools. That Audre Lorde line that you cannot dismantle the slave owner's house with his tools rings truer and truer every morning, right? And then there's an environmental fallout. So this is something I'm actually working on. Again, I realize there's so much stuff that you guys don't know about me. Mad. So essentially, colonizers, after they ruin the environment, make farmers dependent on using pesticides. So even this whole thing of organic and non-organic, the same people that destroy the land will then go and produce organic veg or organic fruits or whatever, but they're not telling you they're the reason why other people can't produce it. It's like really insidious. That's why I think it's so important to talk about this stuff. So again, like, pesticides will then go on to contain like water resources, right? That will then go to kill off the animals and the wildlife that allow us to harvest crops. So even again, it's really bratty when people are like, I hate flies and I hate bees. Well, without those insects, certain crops don't go ripe and they don't go through the process we need. But because of your consumer needs and you need things like A, B, and C, you kill off nature. And yeah. And then after time, when all that stuff happens, the land is basically unfit for farming. You can't rehabilitate it after a certain point. And if you could, I don't know even what the science would look like. There are indigenous people, even in like Punjab, who have certain like natural techniques that work, but they need a really long time to work. It doesn't happen like in a week or like a few days, like the colonizers and the chemicals. So again, when we look at Bhuva Badra, I was even thinking, Bhuva Badra, the man with the two faces, right? The face that you show to the world and the face that you conceal. Think about how much of our consumerism we think is just like girly pop, it's fine, I'm shopping ethically, when inherently none of it can be ethical because it's all rooted in blood and nastiness. So where does that leave us, Hibiscus? You're being shown all these uncomfortable things because when you understand how your identity is being mutilated and weaponized against you, so your oppressor can not only harm you, but justify their violence in the rest of the fucking world. Let the math, let the dots connect like the way you connect to fucking Wi-Fi and that bondage you have to ChatGPT, even though they're currently using all your ChatGPT to fuel the military and kidnap you later. I already made a prediction about it. They're sending that information to the government. The last case study I had was, it's from Pará state in Brazil specifically, right? It's cultural erasure. So, whilst this story focuses on Brazil, the same happens across most of the global south, right? You have these beautiful communities who are craftspeople, knowledgeable farmers, all these beautiful, really, really, honestly, like phenomenal skills. They're erased because the colonizer comes in with their factories. They're erased because cheap imports, right? They're erased because the knowledge holders then don't have the apprentice and the people to throw it down to. Instead, those fuckers want to go and work for the colonizers and just have the thing of like, I work for this company. Like, it's not a flex to work for any company. It really isn't. Unless you create something by yourself and for yourself and it serves people and is rooted in ethics, it's not a flex to work for these people. And that's what Bhuva Badra is, because Bhuva Badra is a heavy rebellion. Even if you look at the story of Bhuva Badra, it's a deity who builds the world, but he has low self-esteem, so he doesn't understand the world wouldn't exist without him. And he's always trying to mutilate himself so he's fitted and he fits in. It's telling you something, Hibiscuses. I don't believe in spoon-feeding spirituality, but I think you're deep enough to get that point. And the last point, and we'll move back on. All of this stuff is meant to create a resistance and revival. Bhuva Badra is the most humanitarian sign in Vedic astrology. It's the last Jupiter nakshatra. Jupiter's what? Ethics, law, governance. Like I said, you're not punished for what you don't know, but when you do know, you have a responsibility. Do something. Even what I tell you all the time, I think you guys are incredibly gifted, right? Use those talents and skills. I've never shared this, but you guys are helping me to figure out ways that like I can liberate Punjab and help them with farming. Like, if you ever wondered what I do with like that astrology money, it's the liberation of my people. I care really deeply about them. I care about like restoring like pride, honor, resources, education, and like prosperous futures. I don't want them to have the same fate as the rest of India, which are also kidnapped countries, where these Western company comes in and like just obliterates them and like makes them like Gundil safe. That's not nature of Punjabi. We are the fiercest warriors on the planet. We come from incredible people, and I will be damned if I exist in a generation that has the most resources and we failed those people. You know, because I come from those people and I could never do wrong by them. But that, I don't know, I think you have to be at a certain pace spiritually, mentally, perhaps even culturally to get that, because there will be other Punjabis who are really, really comfortable with like the destruction of stuff, and they pride themselves on aligning themselves with the oppressor. And the only thing I want you to know is, as you watch this video, I hope your soul's fucking cursed and I hope you never see a penny, because what a fucking sellout. All of that leads me to Uttar which is Pisces type 2 to 5. Now, Uttar is the last Saturn nakshatra, right? So Saturn represents the dissolving of illusions. The light is turning on and there is somebody home is what's meant to happen, right? But often with Uttar the issue is it deeply represents superficiality. So with Uttar right, it is meant to have a lot of auspicious blessings because it's worked really hard. So it's this accumulation point in the soul's journey where you will have bliss. You are rewarded for all that you've endured or you've built. Uttar is associated to generational wealth. But the messy side of Uttar is the following, right? So number one is superficiality. Number two, it often is seen in people who will either lose generational wealth or create it. And 9 times out of 10, if they're like third or fourth in a certain family line, they tend to blow it, right? It also deals with this idea of being very mindful with who you partner with, because it will either make or break a sense of abundance in one's life. Even when you look at it deeper, it has this connotation that the soul sometimes gets so distracted by luxury, comfort, having a great time, being a fine babe, that it's not paying attention to really serious stuff that's happening around it. And in some ways, it's being rotted by the same blessings that it earned. So then what does God do? He will do some explosive, shocking, like, stuff to them. So it snaps them out of a passive state and they go back to taking action. Because also look at it like this. You are now at the part of the nakshatra cycle where you have accumulated all this knowledge. You have earned your stripes. You have learned the difference between right and wrong, and you really are a vessel and of strength, wisdom, capabilities, and you're out here being lazy. I keep thinking of these TikToks that I love. I've been reposting them a lot on my page. There's a really great screenwriter. He's African American, where he does like these kind of like takes of what would happen if Jesus come back. And he's actually like, he's like calling God. He's like, turns out only 2% of my followers got the point. The rest of them, let me tell you about them. And it's so funny because he's like, what do you mean I have to pay you to go inside of a church? He's like, I flipped these tables, don't make me flip them again. But it's that where it's like, you forgot all the blood, sweat and tears that got you to this reincarnation, or even allow you to access the wealth that you have in this lifetime, aka a reflection of what your ancestors done before you. And this is how you're using it. This is what you're doing. Uttar talks about bringing spiritual rain. So it's this idea that like sometimes the most helpful thing the soul needs is detaching from the very same blessings that it's created, because it's got lost in the source and it's kind of lost its dignity, it's lost its ethics, it's lost like that spiritual richness and clarity. Like something's gone wrong here, so we have to wipe the canvas clean, right? So again, when you look at this whole thing of how consumerism is there very intentionally to rot people's sense of identity and distract them, you can see how colonialism would use consumerism to undermine resistance and solidarity. Because what it is through consumerism, you are saying the individual is more important than collective. So think of it like this. Our consumerism currently emphasizes personal acquisition. Oh, you have this. oh, look at them spend that money. Like, all of it is really fucked if you think about it. All of it is, the more we buy, the more powerful we are. And even then, it's a catch-up game, right? You think when you are acquiring more, you have certain things, you somehow are not going to be at the mercy of the violence of the oppressor and their shitty values. Am I lying? No, like, you know it. And then, even if it's not a status thing, right? It's really insidious because, as we were discussing earlier, consumerism basically breaks down cultural identities because they no longer really have possession of that knowledge, that craft, that skill, that art. Like, it actively contributes to the erasure of cultural identities because you're so fucking desperate and poisoned to think if you take that thing from the colonizer's hand, and that looks like in modern day their companies and their conglomerates, somehow that's better than the hands of your own people or the hands of people who have known that thing for decades and have such like beauty over it. Be so fucking for real, right? And the issue is, because they make you so obsessed with I, and I has to show that I'm not a victim and I'm not going to be a worker because I buy more and I own more. Don't you think that somehow disconnects you to this idea of shared struggles? And that is going to then be linked to this idea that you abandon community. And when you abandon community and you abandon this sense of collective, then there's no one that's going to take action against the colonial powers because you're put into such an I mindset. This is what I mean. Like, we think all the day-to-day stuff that we do, all the girly pop stuff, isn't that deep. But if you actually look at what makes us arrive at the girly popness of it all, it's nasty. We basically are the equivalent. You look at 50 Cent's baby mama. I don't mean to make a joke, but like, I believe we're all on the same internet. You know about the P. Diddy trial, right? And we are aware of all the victims and the horrors. But does anybody remember how there were two women? One was 50 Cent's baby mama, who for some reason didn't think she was a victim, which was weird. And then only at the end was like, I felt uncomfortable and it got weird. And then the second one was that lady who wouldn't come to court, and she's like, I love Diddy, but she was the one where literally is like, ma'am, he's come to you because he no longer has access to Cassie and all this shit, and now he's playing you in your face, and like, your abuser is your abuser, like, girl, you are in danger. Are we not that of consumerism? Are we not that? It's giving me the same vibe. That's the image I'm getting. Oh my lord. Oh my lord. Oh my god, I feel like Pam from Gavin Stage. She's like, oh my lord, Mick. Oh my god, Mick. I'm that. In fact, can we play a clip? We're gonna get copyright strike. Insert the clip now. Insert the clip. Now, the next thing I want to point out about Uttar Bhadra is also a lot to do actually with retail and shopping and material abundance. A lot of like wealthy people will tend to have Uttar Bhadra, right? But with Uttar Bhadra, there's a unique lesson around the ethics of money, yeah? Right? So the next thing is, because colonialism is fixated on undermining resistance and stopping people from having solidarity amongst one another, it needs to create internal hierarchy. So think about this. Access to consumer goods often become a marker of status, yeah? Well, at least within a colonized society, which is all of us, because we all suffer from colonialism. That fractures solidarity because it creates this idea of elites versus the others. I talk about this all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've met tapped Punjabis. So, you know that the example I use a lot on my TikTok lives, I have more smoke for brown people than I do for other people, because until I clean up internal mess, I cannot expect external changes. So I have a big issue with all these sellout brown bitches who are like, oh my god, look at them appropriating saris. And you'll have all this positioning of like decolonize, claim yoga, but is your bitch ass not accepting money from brand partnerships that you know their companies are genociding people? Isn't it funny you can't speak out against religious violence? Isn't it funny how you are so quick to align with our version of fascists? Fuck off. Fuck right off. But that's what consumerism does, because they think they are safer in that money than they are with collective liberation. and that will always be one of the greatest illusions. You are never safe. Just because you have positioned yourself, or you are now mirroring your abuser, your oppressor, you are not safe. You have bought yourself some time, but you can never have safety because their system is not designed to make you safe. It's based in exploitation. And the thing is, our consumerism allows these internal hierarchies to happen, because then the wealth disparities are showing who you align with and who I don't align with, right? Then it's showing you think because you own all the colonizers' goods and you have their symbols, somehow you are above us, or you don't share our struggle. When, what the fuck? And again, it pits others against one another, because then what happens is you get these delusional fuckers who go, I don't want them to have access to the same things as us. That's the whole thing of old money versus new money, is it not? That's Uttabhadra. When Saturn goes to Uttabhadra, this is when you learn all that stuff. This leads me to the last 2 points I wanted to make, right? So the one after that was, it's a point around psychological control and this idea of cultural, power, and everyone becoming one, right? So when you get into consumerized mindset, it's internalized inferiority. Think about why you need to have a certain brand of something. And don't bullshit with the quality is better. It's not the case every time. You have it marked in your head that I buy from this what? Be honest. Be so fucking for real, right? Even in India, I think about, do you know what makes me laugh? Sometimes in India, right, you'll get these upper class people who are obsessed with wearing Western brands, but they're not understanding the material. It's nasty, it's polyester, but you could have garments from local craftspeople, buy from Punjabi brands. It's 100% cotton, it's 100% linen. You are literally degrading yourself in your consumption of the colonizers' fucking goods, but because it's their brand, you think you're superior, you become richer. Fuck off. It's the same way when I go back home, I have no respect for modern Bollywood. I fuck all of them, especially those Nepo babies, which we'll be doing a video about shortly, right? These bitches will wear the most tackiest stuff, and then these poor people in India are like, oh my god, how stylish. I'm like, fuck off. They're wearing something from Zara. Fuck off. That's from Primark. This is all shit created in child factories. This is not glamorous. And then the audacity is they'll only ever wear cultural garments, which again come at the exploitation of embroiderers and textile markers, and be like, I'm so proud to be Indian. Then pay the fucking workers properly. If you're so proud to be Indian, invest in the fucking tools and resources, the norms, the policy. Vote for the parties that do right by these workers, but you won't, because you need to feel better than them, right? So you will consciously or unconsciously keep contributing to the things that hurt these people. And then you want to believe, I don't understand why I'm suffering. Why my marriage is suffering? Why does my money not stay? Because you are inherently a fucking nasty prick. And you know that. And it is a choice after a certain point. This leads me to my next point, redefining identity. Colonialism sought to erase indigenous people so it could say it's the creator. And then it makes you feel like you're, hibiscuses. You have to be more conscious of how you consume. It's trying to create a new identity so you forget your people, so therefore you forget their violence, their nastiness, their poison, and then apparently we would all become one loving freaking fascist. Fuck off. I'm not with it. Your value has become tied to purchasing the power within a colonial system. How are you not disgusted? I feel sick making this video. You have to understand, when we talk about Saturn going through Pisces and we talk about imprisonment, these are the deep lessons. You cannot keep making a joke. You cannot keep thinking your oppressors and abusers are going to save you. You can't even express and be the person you want. How on earth? You cannot seek healing from the same people who make money from your pain. What kind of insanity? I'll give you the last point, right? Manufacturing consent. When we internalize consumerism as a part of our identities, we become invested in an economic system that provides these goods, even if that system exploits, harms, destroys everyone around us. Resistance feels like this is it. They make consumerism your identity, so then your literal resistance almost feels like a betrayal and an attack on yourself, because so much of your identity its craft on being them, buying from them, and aligning with them. That's the kicker, isn't it? That's it right there. This leads me to the last Pisces nakshatra, Ravati. So the gag is Ravati symbolizes wealth, right? The ultimate abundance. It's ruled by Mercury, trade, business, the brilliance of expression, psychological development. Ravati even deals with this idea of two becomes one, right? But it's a story of an unconventional princess who frets that she's not going to get what she wants because she's so different. When we look at Ravati, right, ultimately in this nakshatra, it's a journey either towards illusions and victimhood, or liberation and enlightenment. But our thoughts control everything. Because really, if you think about it, when you look at the story of Ravati, in the Puranas, the stories that are associated with Ravati are around insecurity. It's this idea that I am not enough, but I need something else. I need to conform. And then Brahma comes down and basically starts slagging everybody off. And is like, what are you talking about? I have several other universes happening at the same time. You exist in all of them. You are different to other people the way you are different here. But in all those, you have achieved. The only thing that's stopping you from succeeding or having you what you want in this universe is your thoughts, because you have now somehow ended up in a position where you think the very gifts and talents and blessings that I gave you somehow are a curse. Is it clicking to you? I'm standing on business on the beach, whatever Bieber said, right? Which, this is my last point, I think, right? Legacy. Because when you get to Ravati, it's death. It's the endings of all endings. It's associated to Pushan, who's the guide of souls, right? This is the person that will take you from this life into whatever reincarnation comes next. Specifically, he's the guide of lost souls, if you want to get technical. And this is the thing. When you look at all these things that we're going to see, right? And I think that was my 5th prediction, but 5 things become really clear. You are going to be faced with undeniable realities of what our consumerism is. And after that, it is a choice, because this is a legacy you will leave. Don't forget, I kept saying, we're in a time now where loads of people are walking into something, and only in a few years' time, or when their descendants look back, it will become very clear these are the people that condemned us to this insufferable present that we live in. Or it's when I made A, B, and C, I imprisoned myself to this fucking society. But I was so gone in illusion. But it equally can be like, that's when I freed my people, that's when I created generational wealth, that's when I created harmony, because I understood it for what it was. I was enlightened enough not to fall for it or to wake the fuck up, and I moved on. So look at it this way, right? The legacy is going to be neo-colonialism and globalization, right? So globalization, when they say it, so when I say globalization, I don't mean it in its actual sense. When I say globalization, I mean like modern networks where people like local businesses, but they have the ability to trade with one another and it's fair. Globalization in practice is the exploitation of the global south so the West can have everything they want. That's basically what they're getting at. So looking at this, right? There are so many countries now that kind of have formal independence. We don't, because the colonizers still interfere with us and they set up our leaders. So we still suffer, right? But after formal independence, the economic structures and the consumers' desires were cultivated. All that is still influenced by the colonizer. Everything we created is still a reaction and a pain of the colonizer. That's why we still cosplay as them, right? Because none of our economic structures, none of our consumer desires are actually us. As we have learned throughout this video, they're deeply poisoned by what? Think about this. Former colonies to this day remain markets for goods from multinational corporations who, again, often based in the colonial powers that first exploited these people. And we become a source cheap of labor and resources for them. The legacy is continual exploitation if you're not careful. And cultural dominance. Global advertising and media is dominated by Western corporations, and even the people they have in companies that come from those countries that are being exploited and harmed, it's often by elite and nepo babies and these nasty people who have lied with the oppressor. Like, get off our fucking necks. All of it is created to promote consumerism, and that impacts our identities, and that marginalizes local cultures, values, sustainable practices, knowledge, and that aspiration, because that's what it is. They make consumerism your identity, so you aspire to be oppressed, you aspire to be like the colonizer. That's all seen in the lifestyles we think we want and the goods we think we can't live without. And all of that eventually creates the erosion of alternatives. The overwhelming dominance of consumer models makes it incredibly difficult for marginalized people and alternatives, and essentially people who want to do good and who are locally rooted, who are sustainable, and have identities that they're actually connected to thrive. You have a responsibility here, and your inability to realize it and fulfill it is actually sickening. And I don't want to hear why am I suffering, because as I make this video, I don't know how to make it even clearer to you. Consumerism was never your natural identity. You have been forced to think buying things gives you a personality. You have been forced to think if I have A, B, and C, I will be safe. It's a status thing. It's not. It's all a fucking illusion. That's what Saturn going through Pisces is. It's the endings of all endings. These 2.5 years are meant to be enough to wake you the fuck up and get you to pivot. And if you don't pivot, I don't know how many more ways I can tell you. Look at all the predictions I gave you about fascism. Look at what I have said. You know what's coming. I tell you every other week what's coming, but it is a choice now. You have a choice to make, hibiscuses. You know what? As I've been doing this video, I am slightly worried that for some of you, it won't sink in how deeply serious it is for you to reflect on how consumerism is stopping you from being who you really should be, because that's the key to dismantling colonialism. And I really need you to identify that, hibiscus. I think I have 3 points that can make it super clear. And if you get these 3 points, then I think we're onto the money. Because when you are connected to your identity, then we're going to start having real shifts in society. And we need that to happen sooner rather than later. And it will happen, and I'll probably just panic myself. But I need this message to sink in, right? So let's start with the first point. Throughout this video, we have clearly seen how consumerism contributes to how we build our identities, right? We've obviously ended up in a moment of time where our material possessions somehow are seen as an extension of ourselves. So you think you know who I am and what I'm on by the clothes I wear, the places I choose to go to eat, the car I drive, even what kind of laptop does she own, blah, 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 right? There's this brilliant academic, his name was Pierre Bourdieu, right? He talks about consumption choices. It's cultural capital. You remember what I said about Saturn represents in Pisces assimilation? When we choose certain products, it is a statement. You know, we think, for instance, think about on TikTok, and I'm definitely guilty of this. There's this French crockery brand that everyone is obsessed with, right? And they've been around for hundreds of years. There was almost this little cult that was created that if you own this French crockery set, you're an elite babe. You know, that's quiet luxury. That's old money. If we know that we are ending up in a space where the things that we desire are deeply actually shaped by us being accepted and being seen as good and worthy and valuable, don't you think something's wrong? It's not right that you will break the bank buying something so you have some cultural standing, some cultural capital. Even then, don't you think it's messed up that you'll have people in the global south wanting to buy Western goods so they look elite and not suffering, and then people in the West want to buy artisan stuff from the global south so they look cultured and they look well-to-do and it's kind of niche? And no one wins in that, because either way we're all being oppressed and exploited for money, but somehow they make us think us buying from one another is way more important than us overthrowing them, who make it difficult for us to even thrive in the air that we breathe. Oh my God. Right? Think of it even like this. What was his name? There was a guy called Thorstein Veblen, right? He talks a lot about conspicuous consumption. So there's this idea that if I don't have this thing, if I can't afford this thing, I socially become invisible. It's so wrong that we use consumerism to construct our identities, because when you really break it down, we really are driven by fear. We are hoping our consumerism affords us a certain level of safety from not being ostracized or poorly perceived. And that's not really the issue though. The issue is you live in a society, you live in traditions and norms and values that seek to exploit you, that seek to create inequality so someone can look supreme and the other one can look inferior. You are the victim of cruelty, and you are not gonna buy your way to freedom or safety. It's when you abandon that mindset, your power comes back, Hibiscus. Which leads me to my second point, right? In some ways, consumerism as our identity is also a social ritual, is it not? That's the engine that's driving it. Because under capitalism, which is a child of colonialism, because the whole thing is make money, make money, make money. And it's not make money for everyone. It's make money for the elites, the industrialists, the tech colonizers, all the fucking harbingers of oppression. It's not in our interest to allow you to have time to rest. Think about the eradication of third spaces. Like, it's wild that you have all these music venues, all these restaurants, all these cafes, all these community centers and all these things shutting down, but yet thank God that like you can work from home. It's tied. The thing is, when we are participating in consumerism and we're like, oh, I bought this, if you bought that, you can afford to go here, we should go together, they're rituals of belonging. Because again, my question is to you, right? Think about when you prioritize what you want to buy. So you saved up like hundreds of pounds to go to a music festival, which inherently is bad, because they shouldn't charge you that money to listen to music, right? Everyone is charging more and more because we're all being more exploited and trying to break even. It's so fucked, right? When we buy, it's for a sense of belonging, because we no longer have hobbies. We're no longer spending time sitting down at cafes, having beverages, talking, discussing, because the thing is, they try to make you docile and dumb and distracted so you can't resist. It's literally trying to weaken you knowledge-wise. So therefore, we're still human. We still have a need for belonging. Every religious scripture shows us belonging in community is so pivotal to spiritual growth. So when I make you so wrapped up in individualism and I make it in such a way, the only time you can really belong is when you're buying stuff with other people or they have the same products of you, but all that feeds into your harm. Think of it this way. You know, when Palestine came into global consciousness, because it hasn't always been, unfortunately, think about how many people started bonding over what they were boycotting. It was a choice, right? And it showed you who's about what. Then think about how many people who were like fake allies all of a sudden said they're going to go back to drinking those rancid Starbucks drinks, eating McDonald's, like the golden arches of evil, because they all of a sudden felt that they didn't want to have solidarity with Palestine. Think about the amount of people that like couldn't even boycott in the first place. But that social ties, your consumption or your non-consumption allowed you to pull social ties. How could you ever say consumerism isn't political? And don't you think what you're consuming says heaps about your identity in that moment? The Saturn and Pisces is showing that. Sometimes it's not about what we have, it's what we don't have. that shows you the strength and the might of someone. And what happens if you're entering a time where the real luxury is in what you don't have, that you are not complicit with this shit, and you take that energy back, you build community elsewhere, you create new resources, you create better ways of living, existing, buying from one another that's fair and not exploitative. Think about how much consumerism and marketing now is associated to like this sense of community. Think about like how a McDonald's positions itself. Think about the way a Netflix is positioning itself. All these companies that are literally associated to really bad, awful shit. Think about how they're positioning themselves as a community. Think about Tesla. Tesla got lit the fuck up. Elon Musk is a outright fascist. He's the perfect embodiment of tech fascism, right? He's the evolvement of it, the spooky Pokemon. Think about how when all those Teslas were getting vandalized because people like, you're relying with oppressors, why are you driving this car, this is disgusting, you know what that man represents, how quickly he was like, Tesla community, you're so safe. What do you think that is, Hibiscus is? My last point was colonialism's hidden influence. You can't say consumerism is just girly pop. It's cultural erasure. It's economic extraction. If anything, consumerism is symbolic colonization, is it not, Hibiscuses? So, Hibiscuses, where does that leave us? Well, I believe it's taken us to the point where you have a clear option. Either you can keep struggling with your identity crisis and acting like you don't know why you feel uncomfortable, or what things may be provoking you to have that identity crisis in the first place. Or you can start deeply questioning everything around you. Because believe it or not, when you start questioning topics like we've just discussed now, that leads to the downfall of colonialism. Because that critique stops them from being able to exploit, extract, manipulate in all the ways that they're used to. And look at it like this. When you start questioning, you lay the foundation that allows us to destroy all the influence and hold they have around us. And destruction and creation are one of the same thing. And then you open up the paths where we can reinvent stuff, which is actually part 3 of this series. Part 1 was for you to truly understand how colonialism impacts you as a person. Part 2 was you understanding the tools of the colonizers that confuse you from seeing your own identity, i.e. consumerism. And the third part, we're going to start exploring what you need to do to reconnect with your identity, but you have to see all the connections to really do that work. You know, Vedic astrology is a religious practice. Whilst I have evidently a girly pop persona, and you know, I'm carefree brown girl, that is my reputation. I've had it since I was 17. I feel immense amount of responsibility because I think me and you exist for a reason at this time. You know, I think it's very much predestined. I think it's very intentional. And the job that we have to do is to create better things. But that really starts with us destroying a lot of stuff. And it also begins with us realizing, even if it's uncomfortable, how we contribute to the oppression of ourselves and others. And whilst it's an uncomfortable exercise for a minute, everything is impermanent. That discomfort will then turn to empowerment. But it's step by step. You don't jump from point A all the way to Z. You step on everything and you get there, you know? I think I want to end our chit chat with you asking yourself a few questions that will prepare you for part 3 of the series. So, number 1, do I feel the things I surround myself with reflect who I truly am? Number 2, or do I feel less sure of myself the more I consume? Point 3, who am I outside of my consumption? 4, when I feel lost or unsure, how do I remedy that feeling? 5, what are my hobbies? 6, What are my desires? 7. What are my values? 7 is a number of Ketu, liberation, emancipation. Switch on the hibiscuses. Other than that, this has been a pretty interesting cosmic chit chat. I have much pondering and reflecting to do, as do you, and then we'll meet up next week. All right, bye.